Celtics Beat is brought to you by Prize Picks and the Game Time app.
What's up, everyone? Brand new Celtics Beat to close out the month of October. It is Halloween. Happy Halloween. And for those of you out there that are listening, I guess this doesn't really apply to you as much as those watching on the CLNS YouTube page, but visually, it's a visual suck. None of us came in the spirit of Halloween. None of us are dressed up, unless I guess we're just dressed up as Celtics podcasters or something like that. I didn't put any real forethought into that. You know, maybe I would have come in the old Batman costume that I've got stashed in the closet. Ev, you're just, dressed as a...
I'm dressed to kill per usual,
You're dressed to kill. Just your day job. And then Sean Grande, of course, the voice of the Celtics, who we have had on a number of times. Usually it depends whether we catch you at home or catch you on the road. We catch you at home, we know what backdrop we're expecting. You're on the road, could be any number of different things. But what, t-shirt? That's pretty much all we're working with here.
You get the road. That's the road uniform. Essentially, I could angle a thing and show you the city of Charlotte, North Carolina out the window, but there's lighting issues or whatever. Everyone can just use their imagination. People can make their own backgrounds. I assumed that within this world, is this the equivalent of November sweeps, that you go and get the big star for this episode, that you were like gearing up, building up to this? I don't know how the ratings work.
Neither do we. It's a great question.
I just want to, Kaufman,
anybody.
Yeah. Kaufman, you keep me talking shit to Grande when you're wearing a Toon Squad t-shirt. Like, what are we doing here?
Just a big space.
Actually, I married into Michigan, so I saw.
There you go.
Yeah.
Nice win against Michigan State last time out.
When your school doesn't play football anymore, this is a true story. So back in my youth, when I was the next big thing, I'd go to ABC, right? And there's Keith Jackson and Brent Musburger. And one of the things we had to do on the first day of college football meetings is go and shoot these little things for what now is sort of ESPN Plus, but back then was ESPN Game Plan, where they would run all these college football games. And you'd have to say, I'm Sean McDonough, and I watch my school, Syracuse, on ESPN Game Plan. And they're lining everybody up, and they get to me, and I'm like, I can't do this. And I'm sure they thought I was who the hell is this kid, like, refusing to do this thing? I'm like, yeah, my school just dropped football.
It's not that I won't. It's
not that I won't. It's that BU. Hey, we were undefeated a few years ago, but now, we dropped. We dropped football. And there's Title IX and the whole thing. So I'm just gonna stand over here.
Just gonna lay out. Let McDonough and the rest do their thing. Do want to do a quick shout out, by the way. This is not an affiliated sponsorship with the show or anything like that, although maybe one day that would be fun. The 90s department, Geo at the 90s department. For those of you that haven't checked it out, you should go to the website. Some cool stuff. He sent me a hat, this cool Celtics hat that just to show people who are watching. It's a cool look. I just wanted to give him a shout out. Represent this thing a little bit.
You want to send me free stuff? You want to send Sean free stuff at the same time?
Yeah, well, I'll take free stuff.
How Kaufman's the only getting free stuff here. That's driving me crazy.
This is so. Not only do you go for the biggest star you can possibly get, now you're trying to throw ads into the thing at the same time.
Like you said,
week, baby.
It's we're really embracing it. Look, we got to get excited about something. It's not like the Celtics are going to go 98-0 or something like that. Undefeated is off the table at this point in time. Only the Cavaliers and the Thunder, expectedly kind of the Thunder, obviously. Only these two teams are sitting at the top of their respective conferences. The Celtics no longer perfect after this overtime loss at Indiana, a game in which, look, I thought they were going to cover. I thought they'd cover the 6.5, 7 points, depending on where you like to shop around, just to mix in a little bit of betting talk. But, maybe if they hadn't played with their food at the beginning and fallen down by 20 plus points, might have happened. It was a nice comeback. They didn't roll over. Obviously respect that. And I'm kidding. Nobody was going to go undefeated. We all know that. The Celtics, they are off to a banner start, you might say. 4-1, some really impressive wins against the would-be contenders in the Eastern Conference as well. Blew out the Knicks in the openers we talked about last week. Most recently, took down Dame and Giannis and the Bucks as well. And we expected a competitive game with the Pacers, certainly a competitive playoff series last year, even though it only went 4 games. Every game was close. And so that's a team to keep an eye on in the Eastern Conference. But now we've got this 5-game sample to start off the year. And where I want to start is, Sean, I was asked going into that game, what are your expectations for tonight? I'm doing this interview and I I boiled it down to this. And in a lot of ways, you could kind of boil every game down to this, I recognize, but I was just specifically talking about this one with the Pacers. I said, Celtics, they're going to take their 45 plus threes, wound up being almost 60, but they're going to take their 45 plus threes and they hit 40% of them, they're going to win going away. They hit between 30 and 35%, it's going to be a close game, and who knows, maybe they'll lose. They end up shooting 33%, and, we saw what happened, obviously. Is it that simple with these Celtics, given the volume, obviously, that Missoula ball dictates, that if you reach a certain benchmark, you're the stats guy, reach a certain benchmark when it comes to these three-pointers, then you can all but guarantee victory, whereas they fall just a little bit below that and you're in for a dogfight?
The stat guy? Yeah. When they induct me into the Hall of Fame, is that what they're going to say? Yeah.
It's gonna be part of the tombstone. Yeah.
To some degree, it is that simple in this regard. And I don't want to go over anybody's head, but here's a literary reference. In a great classic early episode of The Simpsons, when Apu is trying to get his citizenship, right? And Homer is teaching him all this crazy stuff or whatever, and he studies for the citizenship test. And they ask him what was, the test, what was the cause of the Civil War? And he said, well, outside the obvious conflict between abolitionists and anti-abolitionists, there were several factors. And the guy's like, just say slavery. Slavery it is, sir. And obviously it's extremely complicated what causes the Celtics to shoot that. But if you look at the number, if you extrapolate the numbers afterwards, when the Celtics don't get past 35%, that's when they become mortal. And the real reason last night was that the Pacers defended the three-point line extremely well early in the game. The reason the Celtics got back in it was because Indiana doesn't know how to play slow. They don't know how to play with a lead, and all of a sudden they had a lead that should be impossible to surrender. When you're up by 22 at home with 8.5 to go, you should be able to milk that baby, and they don't know how to do it. They can't run their offense. But defensively, I thought they were really good, and maybe not having Turner ended up helping them a little bit, in that they were a little smaller, more athletic, and more mobile defensively. And when you think about the threes, what was so striking as the Celtics are ruining basketball, as everybody's saying, for the first week of the season, what was so striking on opening night and in some of these early games is how open the three-point shots have been, that the spacing has been so good that you're watching Derek White and obviously Al and even Jason would get a couple getting open threes. And if you think back to Wednesday night in Indiana, how many of those shots at the beginning were open? The Celtics were an ordinary three-point shooting team because they were really being guarded well at the three-point line.
Yeah, and sometimes with the lack of Turner inside, it almost felt like it was easier for Boston to get those layups, right at the basket. And it almost felt like Indiana was like, hey, take as many, you'll try and take as many threes as you want, but you'll end up trading them for twos, which is exactly what I criticized New York for. The opening night was like, how do you guys passing up open threes to take tough twos against a team that took 60 threes? Like, that's just not good. The math's not going to work. This Indiana team, I find fascinating because of just their ability to say, defensively, we're not going to not say try hard, but it's not going to be our priority. Our main priority is getting good shots down the other end. And they always do. Like, they're just, and even some of the tough ones that they make, like Pascal Siakam's three to win the game at the end of the game was not an easy shot. And Pascal's not the best 3-point shooter in the world. So when you look at everything, I first off, I want to thank everybody for not freaking out after a loss last year. I don't know about you, Sean, but I found it nauseating to just after every time the Celtics lost, everybody's having a meltdown. At least like today, it doesn't feel like it's so bad. Boston didn't play.
Real quick, Kev, keep in mind, Sean's good buddy Bill Simmons used to, I don't know if he still does this, but way back when, back in the ESPN Page 2 days, he used to talk about a team winning a championship and you get a grace period, right? Now, where we are in the world and sort of this what have you done for me lately culture that we live in, I'm not so sure that grace period exists to the same degree that it used to, but I think some of that comes into play. Like if the Celtics weren't just coming off a championship, you would probably have a reaction to that game last night versus the more subdued, whatever, they're 4-1.
You'd also have a reaction to the game if they had just gotten blown out by 25. That would be different than them coming back from 22 down and forcing overtime and having a real chance to win. And doing it, by the way, with Pritchard and Keita, on the floor. I think this weekend's going to be interesting in Charlotte because you get the first back-to-back without Porzingis, which means you're probably going to get some Kata this weekend. You're going to get, different looks. But did we not have this conversation the night before either game 4 or game 5 of the finals when we did this once? And I said, the Celtics are about to walk through the looking glass to the other side, where you're not only talking about Tatum and Brown as champions, as guys that are going to have their numbers at the top of the building, about Drew Holiday and now Horford going into the Hall of Fame. The other thing that comes with this is that all of the angst is going to be put on the teams that haven't won. And I mean, there's not going to be a lot of conversation about the Celtics other than them ruining the game, shooting all the threes. And, Joe finding a way to, I began the coaches show last night by saying, did you ever imagine one day, not that you'd win a championship, but you would open your mouth one day in a random radio interview with our flagship station, and it was going to be a national topic the next day, right? And that is where we are with Joe. But the angst is going to be, you already can feel it with Milwaukee, with Philadelphia, with the Denver bench. That's where the angst is going to go. And meanwhile, the Celtics, unless, they win 46 or 47 games or something like that happens, it won't, and there'll be bad nights and people will react badly. Here's what you're going to get with the Celtics this year. Here's the negative. The nights will come up where they go, 8 for 38 from 3 and lose. And people will say, oh, they shoot too many threes and they got to stop shooting threes. When they shoot threes, win 64 games, win a championship walking backwards, and start 4-0 because they're shooting threes, nobody says anything about it. It's only on the nights that they lose, people will complain about them shooting too many threes when everybody else in the league is trying to copy what they do.
Yeah, that's my favorite part. It's like people didn't watch last year and just say that like last year was an abnormality that they won 64 games and went 16-3 of the playoffs and pretty much boat raced everybody to their 18th banner. Everybody complaining that killed me. And again, it comes back to this particular point that you hammered. Again, Sean, you had this in like February. I want to say like January, February, you came on here and you're like, look, if everything goes like it's gone the first couple of months of this season, this is going to be one of the best teams anybody's ever seen. And they're going to raise a banner and this is a championship team right here. And that particular segment that people ran with the first couple of days of the season drove me crazy because, again, we are devaluing how special this group truly is. And I mean group from Brad Stevens all the way down to like Jaden Springer and Jordan Walsh and everybody at the end of the bench. This is a collective unit that is breaking the mold of basketball and rewriting a new chapter. Like we spoke about Simmons already. I was listening to him and Kirk Goldsberry talk about this new era of 3-point shooting and how the Celtics have taken the torch from Steph Curry and those Warriors teams and elevated it to a whole new level. And now they're ushering in a whole new era of 3-point shooting to the point where, it's not just about the 5 guys that start this thing. The Celtics bringing off the bench when they're fully healthy, a 6'1" point guard who, I don't know, is going to shoot 10 threes a game, hit 40% of them, and is the best buzzer beater shooter, not named like Michael Jordan, history of the game. They bring off Sam Hauser, who shoots 40% from 3. And then there's 30-whatever-year-old Al Horford, who also shoots 40% from 3. Like, they're breaking the mold of shooting in contemporary basketball. And yet we still find ways to just distract and detract from how historically amazing this team is. This has honestly fueled my hatred to the point where I feel like I'm back in time and I'm a Heat fan when LeBron and Wade and Bosh meet up. And I'm just like, bring me all your hate. This is delicious. I'm watching spectacular basketball night in, night out, and you guys complain about it? Go ahead, bring it on. I'm enjoying myself.
First of all, you feel like they could get the kid that Peyton was playing out in the park and throw him up there, and he would knock down threes.
He would too. He'd be all right. He'd knock a few down.
Be like, all right, yeah, get him. And be like, okay, great. It's the end of the quarter. Give it to the kid, right? And he'll run it up the floor and shoot the threes. The angst towards the way they're playing is interesting to me because it's almost as if you would hear people complaining, going, oh, they're throwing all these long passes for touchdowns now, and there's too much scoring and whatever. I preferred when it was like, 3 yards in a cloud of dust and, it was 3rd and 1. I don't quite understand the analogy. Like, oh man, Gretzky and Messier, they're ruining the NHL, scoring 6 or 7 goals a game. Where's the neutral zone trap? I want to see the Devils and Flyers play that 1-0 game. I don't quite understand where that comes from, other than it's the how's my driving theory, which I've used for many years, which certainly applies to my field, which is again, a philosophy I've learned to live by, to remind people that nobody ever, ever, ever picks up the phone number when they see that how's my driving bumper sticker and calls in and says, hey, I just want to tell you, I saw your driver back out of this loading dock into 2 lanes of traffic and merge perfectly on the highway. And I just wanted to let you know that.
Jeff's kiss.
Right. That doesn't happen. People are only going to complain, and it's a social media age. But yeah, it is interesting. And the angst that came with last year, I'm sure I said it here. I think that was that quote that people pulled, I think was when I was on with you guys, when I said, what if there is no game 6s or game 7s or something like that, which is what turned out to be true, because I've been around long enough to see it, right? To know that that's how things go, that teams that dominate like that in the regular season. And even 08, the funny thing about 08, that team did go wire to wire, which obviously this team won't, and last year's didn't either, because Philadelphia had first place for when the Celtics lost games, the 6th and 7th games last year, the Celtics lost after starting 5-0, so they didn't go wire to wire. The 08 team did. Wire to wire in the regular season, wire to wire in the playoffs, and that team lost 10 playoff games.
Yeah.
And there was all kinds of angst against Atlanta and LeBron and Cleveland and whatever. And that is, people look at the 08 team as this standard of 60, all the 66 wins, wire to wire, never trailed in a playoff series. That is domination. And last year's team blew that away. They had a much higher scoring differential and lost 3 games in the playoffs and not 10. But people didn't appreciate it then. I think there's going to be a little more appreciation now. I think seeing the rings and the banner and the grace, you're not going to get it from everybody. And you can choose to take one comment on Twitter and go, look at these fans, they don't appreciate. I think it's a different ball game now, and people understand it. But at the time, what I kept saying was it wasn't about predicting that they were going to win. If you remember, it was more like, people, look at this. There was so much more angst for the 18 losses than there was joy in the 64 wins because of what had happened earlier. 08 didn't have that. 08 was its own thing, that they won in their first year together. People had seen Tatum and Brown in the playoffs lose, and there was disappointment and fear, which I think this comes from the social media age, is just much more fear of getting ragged on by fans of other teams and whatever. And no matter how many of these of the game prep that I would use that I put online about the Celtics have done this amazing thing, there would always be a couple of people saying, yeah, but they haven't won a championship. The Celtics have won more playoff games than anybody in the last, but they've only won 1 championship. But even the night that people don't, if you listen to that social media crowd, you've got to tune some of it out. When the Celtics won, one of the things I called attention to that night was after years of he can't win the big one. Jason Tatum being this guy that was a good player, but not a great player, whatever the narrative was. And then he wins at age 26. And I said it in one of the last 4 minutes of the call. I don't remember everything I said, but I know I referenced the fact that he now has more championships at age 26 than Michael Jordan, Shaq, Steph, all these guys combined, because they didn't win at 26. And that was just something visceral to see. Like, understand that Tatum has now won a championship before all these guys. And when you put it out there, and of course, whenever a tweet goes crazy viral, there's always going to be people that see it. And there are people like, now do Kobe. How many did Kobe? Like, not the point. So there's always people that will try and pick apart and take stuff down. But at some point, instead of saying, I can't believe these people aren't enjoying it, you got to say, well, that's their problem. You're not enjoying it if you're worried about the people that aren't.
Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. They got over 10 million members and billions of dollars in award winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all, so you just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up 100 times your cash. Your game all season long on Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get into the action in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. Prize Picks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy, so your lineups stay even if one of your players gets hurt or injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, Prize Picks keeps your lineup live. Sign up today and give $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus because it's guaranteed. Think Steph Curry will get more than 4 3-pointers this week, or Anthony Edwards more than 27 points? Cook up some hot takes with your friends and win real money this basketball season. Get your crew to run your game on Prize Picks. Download the app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. And, you know, some of the Prize Picks you could be looking at: Luka Doncic for more than 31.5 points, Steph Curry for more than 4 3-pointers, Anthony Davis more than 11 boards, the freak Giannis for more than 29.5 points. Again, download the app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game.
I am curious, you know, you brought up, obviously, you joked about, yeah, bringing the kid that Peyton played in the park and watch him rain threes. But to a certain degree, that is kind of where I wanted to go with this conversation.
You want to bring the kid in?
I want to bring the kid in.
All right, go there. Give him that hat. Give him that hat you brought out and trot him out there. And we'll...
Listen, he looked good. He wasn't afraid when Peyton was backing him down toward the basket. It wasn't intimidated. You know, give him credit.
It was almost Devin Booker like, right? I was like, hey, yeah, you don't double team. It's open gym, man.
I'll throw my elbow up. No big deal. I'm worried about you, Peyton. You're not that big. No, but we got into this a little bit, Ev, on last week's show with, as Sean has referenced a couple of times, the narrative, you know, the whole Celtics wrecking the NBA and the number of threes, as if this hasn't been going on and we haven't been building toward this literally for decades. But I think Evan called out a really good point, pardon me, with it's not just obviously the ability of the starting five. It's bring in Peyton, it's bring in Al, it's bring in Hauser, all these guys that can knock down the three. And this is, you know, this is worldwide. Like, the Celtics obviously are very deep and a proficient shooting team, but Bam Adebayo spent the offseason working on his 3-point shot. He's taken 2 3-pointers a game right now. He was taking like 5 or 6 per in the preseason just to work on a shot. He is looking, even at this stage of his career, kind of like Al, you know, years back, on extending his range and becoming something of a different player away from the basket. And I just think, obviously, like this, and this is not like this hot take, this is an observation. This is just where we're going. And so, that in mind, how much credit do we give, you know, Brad and company for being, I don't even think calling it ahead of the curve is the right way to put it, because again, they weren't really. Maybe in terms of the volume they are, but in terms of the style, they're not. When it comes to roster composition and having all of these guys who are bona fide elite caliber shooters, or is this just where we're going? And in 5 years, every team, I'm not saying every team's going to be as good or as efficient, but every team is going to kind of look to play that way and kind of be built that way.
I was cheating because I want to look up something, and I want to bring up another name, the one name you didn't mention on the roster, and it's kind of funny when it comes to 3-point shooting, and no one's brought this up yet. But I will answer the Brad one by saying something that maybe not being ahead of the curve, but being very aware. He's still the coach. It was one of our coaches shows, whatever, of all the years, you know, the 8 years. It's a lot of time on the air. It's like, when you think about. I always find it funny when watching the media wrestle with, you know, do jujitsu with Joe before every game, that they don't like getting in that contest. I'm like, well, I can do 6-7 minutes with him every night. So you're always looking. The point is, you're always looking for new stuff. And I asked Brad when the 3-point shooting was really starting to skyrocket, and I said, do you think every sport is cyclical? In football, okay, there's the 3-4, then there's the 4-3, then people go with the zone blitz. Everything seems to trend and go around in circles. Do you think one day the NBA do you think now that it's gotten crazy with the volume of 3-point shooting, it's going to go backwards the other way, that eventually the game will shift back, rules will change and whatever? And he said, no, it's going to go the other way, meaning that, and he called it exactly right, that he was saying in 2017, 2018, I'm guessing, that the 3-point line essentially is going to become a suggestion, and that there's going to be more volume of threes, and guys, you know, anticipating the Trae Youngs and the Damian Lillards and the guys who just don't even step to the line and shoot from way behind the line. And he was right that the game was going to get extended. So since he
knocked down a 3-pointer last night from like 5 feet in front of the half-court line, like,
you don't think about it anymore.
Natural range at this point.
Yeah, Trae Young cross half court. He can shoot, as the Celtics certainly know. But when I think about the reason I tell that story is because if he was saying that to me in a random conversation in 2017, 2018, he was already thinking ahead to what the game was going to be. And now here we are, number of years later, that a guy who had a roster when he coached his final game that had Romeo Langford, Evan Fournier, and Tristan Thompson starting in a playoff game, 3 years later, put together a team that walked backwards into a championship. And so if that's the brain we're talking about, I always think back to that moment that, yeah, he was always, all guys who like that are always thinking ahead of the curve or ahead of everybody else. No doubt. And by the way, you're talking about all the guys you mentioned. Everybody can shoot. You bring in Sam Hauser, Peyton Pritchard. You know who was a three-point shooter when he first came in the league? Luke Cornett. Luke Cornett took a ton of threes because you remember seeing him when he first came in the league, and I'm looking it up just for my own, amusement. But he was taking a three-pointer about every 5 minutes or so playing with the Knicks, which is what these guys do. Think about that over like 40 minutes. That's 7 or 8 threes. So when Luke Cornett came into the league, he was shooting threes. And he's the one guy that doesn't do it. You get the feeling like you're saving up for this big, surprise secret moment when Luke Cornett sneaks up behind the three-point line. And it's so funny that in this trend in which guys who never took threes before now take a high volume, Luke Cornett came into the league shooting threes, and now he never does.
Yeah, it's funny how things have changed in Cornett's role over the, I don't know, with 5 years now that he's been with the Celtics. You'd think that he'd be shooting even more threes, but I don't even think he even looks at taking a three anymore. He's more of just like a pick and dive guy and an energy guy in the offensive glass. And of course, we now have the famed Cornett contest that is spread to several people on the Celtics now. I don't mean to change subjects so drastically, Kaufman, so I apologize if I'm taking this in a different direction.
You want to talk about Drake May's concussion?
No, but I am also very interested in that. Because we have Sean, we have a different interesting perspective on things. And we've talked a lot about 08 in comparison to last year's team. And we all argue the same thing all the time. I think, Sean, you've said this ad nauseum. The 09 team, barring injury, probably would have done the same thing if we're being honest with ourselves. They were tremendous to start the year. Injuries, unfortunately.
Keep Laker fans out of the front row when you say that, but okay.
Yeah, I hear you. I get it. I get it. But one of the things that as we get ready for this season and we're looking at things, what boxes are you looking for this Celtics team to check that would emulate a little bit of that 09 magic minus the injury issues that they had in that season?
Well, what's interesting, you see this with a lot of champions. It's not just this team, and you've got the separate issues with Jason and Jalen, the Olympic stuff, and every team's got little stuff that they come back with. But there's that general overwhelming feeling that, they've won the championship, so they're going to take their foot off the gas pedal, whatever. And that generally is not how it goes. And it certainly didn't in 08 when everyone said, they won, so they're not going to be great. And then they lost the third game of the year, and they got killed. And I remember even in the pre-social media age, some people, whatever the equivalent of in 2008 was, of people freaking out on social media, people were doing that. They got killed at Indiana, actually. That was where their first loss was. Didn't even call the game last night. It didn't occur to me that the first loss defending the title was at Indiana. It was in the same building in 08. They didn't play well, and they got beat. And everyone's like, they're not the same team, but they were last year because they hadn't had a loss like that the previous season. And what did they do? They won 25 of the next 26 after that. They were 27-2 going into the Christmas game. So I think teams come back, sort of geared up, and it's less to do with trying to prove people wrong that there's a confidence that comes with winning a championship. And there's a confidence and continuity. You put those two things together, and that's a dangerous combination. And the opening night game was a visceral example of two teams that were not going there were two trains that were not moving at the same speed when the starting gun went off. And the Knicks, who I think are going to be really good and will figure everything out if they can stay healthy. Like everybody, it's always healthy because there's always, as we talk in week one of the season, there is some significant player on a championship caliber team that is going to get hurt. It's how it happens. It's always how it happens. There's some major plot twist coming that we have no idea on October 31st that's going to change the trajectory of the season. But you saw opening night, the Knicks were not a new team, but they were still, ramping up to what they're going to be. And the Celtics just hit the ground running because they know who they are and they know what they're going to be. So the answer to that question is you just want to see them stay healthy. I want to see more nights like last night where they get challenged so athletically at the 3-point line that those shots don't come as easy. And how do you adjust to that? How do you manage the Porzingis injury? How do you manage everybody playing these big minutes? It was game, at some point, when is Jason Tatum no longer a machine that can play 40 minutes at this crazy high level every night? I don't know. We're not there yet, but let's enjoy these times that you're not. So I think how you manage the 82-game season and how teams adjust. The Celtics have, if they've broken the league as far as shooting the threes and changing the way the game is played, you don't think there's 29 other teams trying to figure out how to stop that? Not to mention the fact that one of the reasons, and what's that old, the one people use way too much about iron sharpening iron, that it's already been this way with the Celtics the last few years, but now you really are the main event on a lot of teams' schedule. And that is the fun part. I remember it with Golden State. Remember when the Celtics were sort of starting to come back and you had it's the Evan Turner, Jay Crowder Celtics, under Brad Stevens and the scrappy insurgency. And when Golden State was on the schedule, that was a big night when Golden State came to town. Just like in previous generations before I was in the league, I'm sure when the Bulls came to town, that was a big night in the league. It is a big weekend here in Charlotte because the champs are here. And that's the beauty of you better stay sharp because everybody wants you on their resume. I thought we saw that in Detroit Saturday night, and that is the beauty of this season, particularly as I pointed this out, the Celtics are on an outrageous number of national TV games this year. I mean, it is unprecedented. And this next stretch of games after the Golden State game on Wednesday, which is the ESPN game, and you're going to get the A crew with Mike Breen on Wednesday night. After that game, I think the next 15 or so are just sort of league pass, local cable, under the radar games. And in some ways, those are more fun because, again, you become the target that everybody wants to put on the resume. By the way, after that, when we get to early December, literally every other game is going to be on national TV. It's like 30 of the last 60. Then again, that's another issue for another time, but that's the direction the NBA is going. So
just to piggyback off that idea, real quick, Kaufman, I remember the Golden State coming to town years, and I was at the Garden the night they were, I think, 26 straight, and Boston took them to double time, and then they lost that game. The next night in Milwaukee, Golden State lost their winning streak, and Draymond goes, "You can take the Celtics through that right there. They beat us up last night." And I will tell you, I live in the Berkshires. I'm 2.5, 3 hours west of Boston, so coming into town, everybody. That's all anybody want to talk about. That was the only thing only thing on talk radio that day was that. You could tell that there was a different type of energy and juice in Boston that night because Golden State was in town, and it was one of the best environments I've ever been in. It was cool.
Yeah, it's amazing. And when you think about the highlights of that era, the Celtics ending they didn't end the win streak that night, but they ended the home court winning streak, out in Oakland, and that's one of the signature moments of that Avery Bradley, Jay Crowder, Evan Turner era was winning that game. And so it matters. And that is, I love the season. Listen, I chose the job I chose because I didn't want to give up the playoff games. And obviously the big games matter and telling the story matters. But I think these nights are fun too. The night in Detroit is fun. When young players, remember, as time goes by, all of a sudden young players are coming out of school. And it used to be, wow, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And all of a sudden you're playing against LeBron and Steph. Guess where we are now? Now kids are coming out of college and, oh my God, I got to guard Jason Tatum. Like it happens fast, and it's cool to see.
We referenced a couple of times, trying to repeat, obviously, and that 2009 season that, very well could have been a back-to-back for the Celtics if not for that Garnett injury. And we've talked about that extensively before. But, with KG, one thing I always enjoy about you being here, Sean, is obviously your ability to talk about.
It's got to be many things. I would imagine there's many things.
Well, I said one of the things. There are great things. Is your ability to talk about this team in a historical context, because obviously, as we always like to joke, you are the longtime voice of the team. And so, going back to even just opening night, obviously a week ago or whatever it was, that I often joke on this show, like nobody loves themselves a title and a party like the '08 Celtics. That team might be more championship happy than any team that I've ever seen before. But it was not a big surprise that KG and Pierce, even Ray, these guys back in the building for the ring ceremony, the banner raising, all of it. Do you know, because it's not something we tend to hear about from today's players, if any relationships are forming there to where like Tatum, Brown, whomever, like there have been any conversations with that, not old guard, but most recent old guard, about what it does take and how to get over the hump and how to, be the ones with the target on their backs or, red light on their foreheads, as Missoula likes to say, and all of these things.
I'd go farther to say that both, Jason and Jalen, who that's primarily obviously who you're talking about here, they use those opportunities to ask. They have those kind of minds anyway. They always ask questions. There's a funny one. I may have told you this before. So the first couple of years Jason's around, and he knew that Max played in the league.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting how it happens with younger players and how history seeps into your brain differently. And, like JT and Max were cool, and he knew that Max had played in the league, but it wasn't until Max did the 30 for 30, the Celtic Laker 30 for 30, that I remember JT coming back that fall, and he was much more excited about Max. That's where the history creeps in. And because we are all old now, we can run through everything that happened in 2008. Oh, yeah, remember that Atlanta series? And then Game 7 with the Cavs, and it went back and forth. One of the unique things about my job, you're the voice of the Celtics, but you're also the voice of the Celtics for people who are 90 and people who are 9. And while we can recite every detail of 08, 16 years is a long time. I tried to sort of shout that out again at the call at the end of the championship game, that there's every generation. For the oldest generation, they got one more, and for the children of the 80s, they get one as adults, and the children of 08 get one as adults. The children of 08 of the 80s get one for their kids, and now the kids have their own. Everyone's going to have their own perspective. And to me, when I first took this job, people would go, when Larry would come back, or Kevin McHale would come back, and you'd see people worship the 80s. And now the 08 guys, that's the same thing when they walk around the building. And I know as this is going on, I'm thinking about, what is Jason Tatum night going to be like? What's Jaylen Brown night going to be like? What's it going to be like when Tatum and Brown walk in the game? Is JT going to stick around long enough to play with Deuce? Maybe JJ Redick's son will be coaching the Celtics when, like Jason Tatum's in his 20-something year. And so once in a while, you try to step back and have a broad view. Like tomorrow night, we're going to play Charlotte, and that game is going to have its own X's and O's and its own storyline within the game. But I also like to have particularly on, important nights when you're at the Garden and you're under all those banners, that's the point. Like, where does this fit? Where's the connectivity between the generations? And I think, bringing it back to what you ask, I think you got a lot of guys in that room that do appreciate and like to tap into what those guys bring.
Yeah, I mean, that's reflected, I think, a little bit of starting five. I don't know if you caught that, Sean, but KG is not a prominent, but he's a voice in this thing. And you can tell when he talks about Tatum, he's talking about something a little bit different, as he's watching Tatum kind of like go through all the checkpoints you have to check as you win a title. You could tell that KG and him have had some serious conversations about winning a title and how excited that KG was for especially Tatum and Brown, that they got through the hump and were able to break through and win a title, because he knows what it means to win a title in Boston.
Just as Bill Russell was excited for KG.
Right.
You see how it works generationally, because there's very few people who can understand. We can sit here and talk for hours about winning a championship, whatever, but we don't know. It's a very select club that you get into, and it meant so much to KG. And remember, when KG and Paul Pierce and Ray Allen got together, the three of them, none had ever been to the finals, let alone winning a championship. And the clock was ticking on the new Big Three era the day it started.
Yeah.
Because they were all 30.
No, we all looked at it as a 3-year window at the time.
Yeah. And I maybe we talked about this before, but I remember the flight back from LA after losing Game 7 in 2010. I got on that plane thinking the era, that was it, that it was over. And history will record it. People will write their books or whatever, but I guarantee you it changed on that flight, that the second act, those next 3 years, was born on that flight back. I remember saying something to KG that I would not have said to him had I thought everybody was coming back and that we're going to do another 3 years of this, because it just felt like that was it at the time. So you don't really know. But the moral of that story was always, whenever you're close to it, you got to chase it.
Yeah, like right now they double down on it, right? Like, you look at as a nice way to have two ends of the spectrum. You have the Celtics who are like, we're bringing this whole team back. We're the team up for sale. We don't care. Like, this is the group. This is it. We're diving head first. And then you have on the other side, you have Denver, who has really struggled to have any sort of good feeling at all whatsoever about how they've started their season. They had the best player in the world, and yet they're a relative disappointment. And you look at Boston saying, we're bringing everybody back, and meanwhile over here in Denver, there goes Bruce Brown, and there goes KCP. And now it's like, if Jamal Murray's not amazing, what are we doing here?
Yeah, but Denver's the outlier in what you're saying, because the Knicks were close last year. Minnesota was close last year. Dallas added, Philadelphia added Paul George. So the teams that are closer, we have a strange year obviously happening in the league. And this is in that the haves and the have-nots, the gap is grown. We have a real chance to have 6 or 7 crazy high-level teams, and there's a real chance to have, 5, 6 teams that don't win 20 games. I mean, it never works out that way. And already, Brooklyn's winning games here early, and Portland had a win last night. Then teams that you think are never, you never think are going to win. Well, I think you had a night. Remember this, because this is an odd thing. It's just jumping into my head as we say it. Washington, Portland, Brooklyn, and Charlotte all won last night on October 30th. Let's see if that happens again this year, that all 4 of those teams win.
Kaufman, we gotta find a way to make this profitable. You're the gambling guy, so let's talk about this later off camera.
If it happens again, somebody wins that hat.
Parlay go, everybody. Parlay
right.
go.
Well, we have to look at how many times on the calendar that all 4 of those teams are in action on the same night. That's
by the way, here's how old I am. That when I came in the league, gambling was the third rail. You die. It was a verboten topic. We had the Tim Donaghy thing that we went through.
When you came in the league, 10 years ago.
It was right. And now it's literally, even doing the games with Scal on TV a couple of years ago, it was overwhelmed. You were drowning in gambling stuff. And it was almost as if it was integrated into the game. It was like, hey, this 3 in the air is brought to you by, if he makes it. And it was,
I got to cut you off because you reminded me of something that I audibly laughed at when opening night. I texted a buddy right after it happened. So I'm out to dinner just before the game. Got home in time for tip off and all that. But I'm listening to you guys broadcasting the ceremony and talking about it, and you asking Max about how you follow the emotions of all that and play a game and everything. But you said, like, this was like the out cue to break, you're like, in tonight's, ring and banner ceremony presented by BetMGM on the DraftKings radio, Celtics Radio Network.
I made a note of that. I was
I'm going, good God, like, who let that happen? I mean, that's a whole other conversation, but what are we doing?
Yeah.
And so, like, to your point, it's overwhelming now.
And we obviously had the Jonathan Porter thing happen. And again, not a big deal. And it's comical that people think that, guys who are making $40 million a year are somehow going to be affected by the gambling and stuff that's going on. But it's the way of the world. And again, you just have to change your approach. This year, we've done the quote unquote pivot to video, right? Which was inevitable and probably kind of years overdue. And it's because that is how people are accustomed now. You can't fight against it. When the social media stuff happened, a lot of my colleagues were, well, I'm not going to tweet during games and I'm not going to whatever. I'm like, well, that's where we don't get to decide how people want to enjoy our product. Our job is to deliver it to them and however they want it. My son just turned 13, and his life, until I can wrestle the screen away from him every night after we do his homework, is YouTube. And there are young people that watch, they take in the product the way they want to take it in. And it's our job to deliver it to them in a way that they want it, not to sit here and say, no, watch the game on basic cable. It's all going away. Everything's going to be on the apps. We're in a dramatic change in the NBA as to the way the games are going to be delivered. And, this network's going to have them and this app is going to have them. And you just have to kind of go with it. The Celtics won a championship, right? And to some degree, because of what we were saying earlier, Brad Stevens could see what was going to happen. In my field, it's the same thing. The people who are going to be successful see what's going to happen in 3 to 5 years, and you are prepared for it. It's no different.
All right, we'll take a quick break, get right back to the show. But we got to tell you, today's show, it is powered by Game Time. Game Time is the easiest place to score tickets to whatever event you want to go to. Sure, basketball's coming, football's in full swing, baseball, depends where you live, I guess, but that's just generally behind us. You have hockey, that's going on right now. You want to swoop out to the Garden, watch the Bees, but it's not just sports. There's concerts, there's comedy, theater. Tickets can be found all over the place at Game Time. Even a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier, Ev. And Game Time Picks, it filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so that you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets.
And they have this new thing, Kaufman, called the Super Deal. I don't know if you've seen this yet, if you've been perusing the Game Time app, but basically what happens is Game Time will show you pick we always talk about the Celtics in the show. Let's say we wanted to go to opening night and you pick you're looking through the ticket options. They'll have something called the Super Deal, which means it's in the top 1% of all tickets available for that event. If it has that super deal, you better pounce immediately because those tickets will not be there long. They're too good of a deal.
Lowest price guarantee, like Ev said. So download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code. It is CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Again, that code CLNS. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code CLNS. $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Get back to the show.
I don't know if you have any inside info on this, but we got a little bit of an update on Kristaps Porzingis from Shams yesterday about him coming back potentially in December. He is, I will say the game highlighted him shooting a little bit pre-game, noting that he's, working his way to get back. Any idea on the progress of what I would call the Celtics cheat code waiting in the wings here?
I think it's sort of I don't say it's a highly guarded secret so much as it isn't like you're rushing the very second he's able to play. You're not trying to cram him into a playoff game in the deciding game, right, of the Dallas series. So I think it's a matter of, I think clearly he is, I don't want to say ahead because that one of the dumbest things that have become an accepted part, Doc Rivers used to hit on this all the time. People would say, well, it's 4 to 6 weeks. What is that? You have no idea. As a player who's been through an injury, it's the worst thing to put a label on it when a guy is going to come back. You just have a basic idea. He's moving really well. He's not doing anything hard. He's not doing contact stuff like that. I think it's certainly reasonable to think at this stage, as we enter the month of November, the way he's moving around, that he certainly could be available by December. But again, how much does that matter? And when you have two things going for you, you have, with the loss last night, let me do it in my head, the Celtics are now 35-7 in the 42 games they played without him. Stop, pause for a second, ponder that again. 35-7 in the 42 games without him. And number two, knowing you're going to want him to play.
Playoffs, I assume?
Yeah, including the playoffs. If you could script it, you would want him to be able to be available for the playoffs. And you want him to play what? Answer this. It's a rhetorical question, but how many games would you want him to play in the regular season? 25? 30? It doesn't matter as long as he's, so therefore, you had him in December. He's doesn't play back-to-backs. It's going to be what it's going to be.
I've been saying, Ev, you know this, I've been saying on this show for months, in my mind, and this isn't me saying this is how it will play out. I'm sure it'll be earlier, but in my mind, if he's not back till January, I don't care at all. There is, to Sean's point, and the point we've made on this show a number of times, there is zero rush. Celtics are very good without him. And this regular season stuff, I always implore people, enjoy it. Enjoy the ride. It's game to game. It's thrilling. It's fun. Last night's game in the big picture, did it mean anything? No, but it was a lot of fun to watch there. The comeback and almost win in overtime and all that stuff. But Kristaps Porzingis just has to be healthy come April and beyond, and hopefully can make it through a playoff run without injury. Probably won't. There'll probably be some sort of a setback, but hopefully he is largely available as he was throughout, I don't know, up and down last year through the playoffs, obviously. But it doesn't matter. If he comes back in November, if he comes back in January, that has zero impact, not only on my life, but on the Celtics' lives. They're going to be
an impact on my life. I genuinely enjoy watching Kristaps play because, at least for the Celtics, is he really likes playing for this team. You can just see the positive energy come out, and I don't know. I dig the vibe.
Don't need him and Jalen, and they don't need it.
I know. I'm being selfish. I understand.
I can report this, that 14 months of being here, the dude has not stopped smiling once.
It's my favorite joke because it's clear that he is really enjoying himself.
Worked out, Sean, a lot, and put the championship aside. Obviously, the championship means everything worked out, but just the Kristaps experience, to your point about the nonstop smiling in 14 months, when that trade happened, as I'm sure you recall, and there were a lot of doubters. We had people on this show. There were skeptics of that deal and what it was going to look like and how he was going to play, what kind of player he was previously elsewhere, what kind of role he was going to have, just how it was all going to work. And obviously there were elements of that were based around not just KP coming in, but Marcus Smart going out. And those things were solidified when Drew Holiday was acquired. But let's skip over that and just get to, opening night last year and beyond. Has this Porzingis thing for him specifically worked out better than you expected, or was this what you expected? Again, outcome of a title aside.
Anyone who said this is exactly what they expected, unless you're, Brad Stevens or Mike Zarin, this is, it was pie in the sky. And I go back to the fact that look at how crazy successful the Celtics were running post-ups with KP last year. And that was the one thing. In Dallas, it was horrendous. That's what Rick Carlisle wanted to do with him in Dallas, and it did not work out at all. So there were listen, KP had his own Beach Boys song going, right? He had his own struggles in New York and in Dallas, and he was bringing baggage and stuff, right, that he was bringing to the party. And it was a matter of, it was like when Isaiah Thomas came to the Celtics, that they needed each other. They fit together. And there was a KP element there. I think the other side of it was we were all, and I like to think I'm not guilty of this stuff too, that I can be a 30,000 foot, see the whole field because I've been doing this so long, as you like to point out. But I think a lot of us continue to, maybe to this day, see Marcus with our heart and not with our eyes. And particularly as he moves as a guy who was so physical with that body and gave so much that maybe there's those cold Belichickian NFL moves, right?
Breaking down on him a bit.
And it's happening now. He's off to a rough start. He got hurt again last night. And listen, look at the games played for Brogdon, for Smart, for Rob Williams the year or two before. And look at what's happened since the Celtics made the moves. And we're making these jokes about nobody wanted to take a call from Danny. Why aren't you making the same jokes about not taking a call from Brett?
Well, I think that's obvious now. I mean, the guy doesn't miss. I mean, the Derek White trade started everything, and everybody wanted to give him a hard time for that. Now he's in
the Al Horford trade started everything.
Well, you could. It was a great move. Kemba was shot, and Al's been. Are you mystified by this Al Horford thing? I mean, he is way up there.
Want a soundbite?
Go ahead.
Want something you can pull and say, Grande says this thing. What an outrageous hot.
Absolutely.
Still what we live
Here it is. So whatever you do, make sure I'll pause so you can cut it off and then take it completely out of context, because that's generally how it's done.
It's the best.
You ready?
Started with future Hall of Famer Al Horford.
Well, that's an easy one. He's going to be, because we talked about this. He's got the 2 championships in college.
Yeah, this is no doubt.
Basketball Hall of Fame, so Al's going in. But here's everybody pause. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Al Horford has essentially become Tom Brady. Pause. I'll explain in a second, but so you can have it in and of itself.
Let it marinate.
In context.
Yeah.
In that Al is basically the same, what Tom Brady was doing at 38, 39, 40. And obviously he was at a much higher level and he was an MVP caliber player, but he was like the same guy. There was no drop off. And that's what's happening here with Al at 30. He's the same guy at 34, 30. That's not supposed to happen. And what Al Horford was 3 or 4 years ago, he still is. And he's still giving you the same level of play at, you know, and it's obviously very early in his 38-year-old season, but he looks like he's the exact same guy. And again, managing the minutes matters, and him not playing. I'm sure he won't play one of the games this weekend in the back-to-back, and you'll manage him throughout the season. And that's more the Porzingis thing, is how much more are you leaning on Al, and you're going to have to use Kata more and Tillman and things like that. But it is stunning what a critical player he was. And I tell the story of running into Al fall of 2019. We were still traveling before the pandemic craziness. The Sixers and Celtics were in the same hotel in New York, I think it was. And, you know, the elevator door opens and we're in the lobby and I see Al. And, you know, you're catching up with Al, and it's a moment that we refer back to, because when he came back and when I saw him that night, even though he was a Sixer, it felt like he never left. It just felt like when he walked back in, it was almost as if he was just on vacation for a couple of years and came back home. But it did start with Kemba, who we had a highlight in our game last night. It was 5 years ago. Kemba had like a game winner. Remember, Kemba didn't play well in his first game at Philadelphia opening night. And then the Celtics went off on 110 in a row and had the best record in the NBA in that 1920 season. And Kemba, who wanted so much to be a Celtic, he never got to play a playoff game at home because the pandemic hit in 2020 and everything was in the bubble. And the next year he was hurt in that playoff series and didn't play in those home games. That was the reason that you had like Evan Fournier and guys in the starting lineup, because Jalen was hurt and then Kemba was hurt. But yeah, the game had changed. And you could do the whole sliding door thing about either not making the Isaiah Thomas trade or not making was the Kemba trade a reaction to, you know, having to fill the Kyrie Irving spot. But it was, you know, Brad Stevens, as we've said, the guy who preached all those years about just hitting singles, he's like Freddie Freeman every time up. You know, he's just driving him into the gap. How unfair is it to have? I don't want to hear any. Juan Soto should not be allowed to go to the Dodgers if that even becomes a conversation. It's so
disgusting.
It's so unfair as it is.
Well, you can take Ohtani for deferring all his money to future
salary cap.
years.
Yeah, right? No, yeah, the Ohtani, yeah, deferring all the money. Speaking of Kings,
are we going to have like a Bobby Bonilla day for Ohtani in LA when he gets to pick up a big, huge check?
I think it'll be a little more celebratory, however, when
it'll be a lot more than $1 million.
The Bobby Bonilla Mets didn't come quite as close to winning a championship.
Still, my favorite thing every summer is Bobby Bonilla Day at City.
Yeah.
It's the best.
Yeah, it's running. There's only a few left.
Got to be winding down.
Yeah, I was going to think, are we all going to make it? Are we all going to live long enough to see the end of Bobby Bonilla Day, who is a famous bad contract the Mets gave out years ago, if you don't know, and every year he still gets $1 million check on July 1st.
It's the best.
It's the equivalent. It's the second best deal ever made. The deal that I teach my son that the greatest business deal ever made, not in sports, but in the history of business, was the St. Louis Spirits of the ABA when they did not get one of the expansion slots. They did not get to go to the NBA, and they were really disappointed. And all the other teams took cash compensation, and they just wanted a piece of the television deal. And in the 1976 in the NBA, television deal was like $20 a game, but they got a full share or a 4/7 share of television right money in perpetuity, which means the fancy way of saying forever. Evan, you were acting like you don't know this story. Go Google it. It's the greatest business deal, not in the history of sports, but in the history of business. And this ABA franchise made hundreds and millions of dollars over the years because they got a piece of the NBA television.
Who's getting that money now?
I think the NBA finally got out of it.
Okay.
A few years ago, but for years and years and years, it just literally told all these other teams, the Virginia Squires and the Kentucky Colonels, they all went away and disappeared. And the owners of the St. Louis Spirit made hundreds of millions of dollars.
Been a family for generations.
Yeah.
One more on Horford. We've never ever, believe it or not, had this conversation on this show. I'm curious your opinion of it, and then we should wrap because we've been going for a while. So Horford spent what, 9 years with the Hawks, I think, to start his career, and was obviously, individually speaking, a better player. I mean, he was younger. He was, in his prime. He was, a multiple time
on the 08 team, by the way, that pushed the Celtics to Game 7.
Yeah.
That was his rookie year.
Sure. It was, for people that don't remember, we're all old enough to remember, Al Horford signing with the Celtics was at the time, that was the biggest free agent the Celtics had ever signed.
Yep.
That was significant. No disrespect intended to Dominique Wilkins because he was not the same player at that stage of his career. But anyway, 9 years, I think it was, with the Hawks. And this is now 7, I believe, with the Celtics. Is Al Horford, and obviously he's won more with Boston and may continue to win more with Boston, we hope. Is Al Horford, when it's all done, when he goes into the hall, all that stuff, and I agree with you, there's no debate because, again, it is not the NBA Hall of Fame, it's the Basketball Hall of Fame. What you did in college or Olympics or whatever else, it's all relevant. Is Al Horford remembered as a Hawk or a Celtic?
Oh, it's a Celtic. It's not. I don't think it's even close. And remember the relationship. Al still gets booed when he goes there, not for what he did or didn't do there, but for leaving. So there's. It was not, and he was the best player on that team. And those were good teams, by the way. When you look at the history of the Atlanta Hawks, there's almost like these outlier teams. Remember they had that crazy long winning streak one year, I want to say around 2016.
Didn't he win 60 games with Atlanta one year?
Al was one of those guys. There are a lot of really great players in the Eastern Conference in the 2010s that never got to the finals because LeBron took them all out. And Al was at the top of that list, I think. And Kemba, who we talked about earlier, Kemba was a guy that didn't win a game against LeBron James. He had one of those we had one last night, by the way. Pascal Siakam had lost 13 or 14 in a row to the Celtics until that one last night. Crazy stat, because I know I'm the stat guy. I just love weird, innocuous, useless information. Pascal Siakam in his last 22 games against the Celtics is now 3-19, all 3 wins in overtime.
Listen, you can't push back
22 games in regulation.
Nobody, not even Dick Lipe, has that stat.
Well, what can I tell you? I've lived through it. I stumbled on that one because last year Siakam was really good against the Celtics when he was on the floor, and when he would leave the floor, Toronto would fall apart. So I was aware of those in those games, and then when he got traded to Indiana, it happened again. And he went through a year last year where he played 9 games against the Celtics, and he was deady. His plus minus was even. And when he was off the floor, his teams were like a minus 50, and he went 0-9 against the Celtics last year because he played all 4 games for Toronto and then got traded to Indiana and played against them. So, and then he had the great first half last night. They're up by 22, and then he couldn't make a shot. I was just talking about it during the game. Like, what does he have to do to beat these guys? And then the 22-point lead disappears. And listen, you got to find weird stuff in the course of 82 games to make it interesting.
Celtics are definitely interesting. Off to a 4-1 start despite that overtime loss at Indiana. Now the back-to-back, not on a Monday, sadly, but games in Charlotte on a Friday and a Saturday. Road trip finishes out fittingly enough based on this conversation in Atlanta on Monday, and then it's back home for one of those national televised games at the Garden against the Warriors. And
you buried the lead. I thought you were all excited about the fact I got Joe Mazzulla to laugh last night.
Yeah, we never brought this up. I can't believe we went this far.
We should bring this up before we close out. Joe Mazzulla, I don't want to say finally showing personality. That guy's been showing personality since
that's all he does is show personality.
Yeah, we affectionately refer to him on this show as certified. A psychopath, but our psychopath, and we love him dearly. But yeah, you got him to actually crack an audible smile, if you will, the other day.
Laughed on the air. We're just going to run it as a loop. It was off the thing that happened the other night, which is the challenges. All those, which is an interesting issue because fans got upset, right? Because the Celtics challenged and won, then they challenged again and won, and then you're out of challenges. And even though there was one later in the game with Holiday, I think Holiday's shot hit the rim, but you're out of challenges, whatever. And I passed along the story of a lot of people reacting on Twitter and basically saying, what kind of ridiculous institution is there that where you can challenge and win, and then suddenly you're not allowed to challenge anymore? And I said, marriage. And so if I can get Joe to laugh,
Ain't that the truth?
again, things you try to do over 82 games.
We all talk about side quests and the Celtics' need for side quests to make this year interesting. Broadcasters have side quests too, and I believe Sean knocked off a big one right there.
Yeah, you just got a little list check. It's a long season, kids.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what's next for Joe? Is there something next on the Joe Mazzulla bucket list for you?
I don't know, but I do find it that you got to find interesting topics. Like, you don't want to sit there every night and go, "Oh, Cade Cunningham's averaging 30 points a game. He's really good, huh?" Yeah, because I get it. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel, and you're not trying to rise to every night he has to rise to the great Socratic challenge that is the pregame media gaggle, right? And he has to do that, and then he does a TV hit and whatever. So that you're always trying to find interesting things, and that is a challenge when you're talking to the same guy. Remember, for 17 years, I had two guys. I had Brad and Doc. 17 years I remember saying that to Ime when we did our first one and his first game, that it had been since 2004, went from 2004 to 2021, 17 and a half years between I had anybody on the other end of that headset than Brad or Doc.
Well, you want to talk about three different personalities too.
And that's sort of the challenge of it. And that's the interesting part of it. And, the Brad thing, it wasn't until I became, very friendly with Tracy, with Brad's wife, that I kind of was like tapping into that. You just got to tap into the personality a little bit and make it something that people are going to listen to, that where they know they might hear something at least a little bit different, which, with Joe, I think you always know you're going to hear something.
Listen, this is, I've said this before, and this is no knock on Joe whatsoever. This is removing Joe entirely from the equation. My biggest upset, although it's obviously a credit to the organization, my biggest upset about Brad leaving as coach and ascending into the role that he is in now is that we don't get to hear from him as often. I just always enjoyed listening to Brad. Always felt like I learned something. And I don't want to say that again, it's not the case with Joe. It's just a different thing. It's a different.
Well, we've got the DVD set of all of our pregame conversations with Brad. We'll turn that into a, best of.
Does he have any thoughts on UFC 308?
Coming, man.
Can we get Joe's thoughts on UFC 308?
It's interesting because obviously I've got, I did MMA for a lot of years, but he's interested in everything, but he's not like a UFC fan per se. He likes to study it. The baseball thing was crazy that, I was at the game at Fenway this year when the Celtics were honored, right? And they all sat in the box. And that was a game the Red Sox had a huge comeback. And it started when the Blue Jays dropped. There was a foul ball, pop fly, foul ball, and it was dropped. And as a baseball, if you're a baseball person, that signals trouble, right? When you should, let's say you're up 5-0 in the World Series and you don't cover first.
Hypothetically,
example, as a baseball fan, bad stuff is coming if that happens. We were on the air doing the game last night. I didn't even realize, you see them coming back, but you're calling the game, so you don't see the details. Right. I couldn't believe it when I saw the Garrett Cole play out. And obviously he pitched his heart out and all that stuff, but bad things are happening. When that happened, Joe's not a baseball guy. He literally had his video guys clip that play and showed it to the team. That saying that anything can go wrong if you don't do the fundamentals. And so I think his brain is, and that's where I've had to learn it. He's not a hardcore baseball fan or a hardcore hockey fan or whatever, but he has the brain that a lot of younger coaches have, which is that everything is an opportunity to learn and study, and I can apply something that I see into my coaching.
Like breathing exercises at the theater. For Sean Grande, the stat guy, the longtime voice of the Celtics, Evan Valeti, I am Adam Kaufman. Again, the Celts back to work with a back-to-back Friday and Saturday at Charlotte. Hopefully next time we're talking, because again, that's probably going to be after the Golden State game. I'd love to say 4 more wins. It's entirely possible, but even if we're sitting here with this team sitting at 7-2, I don't think anybody's going to be complaining, obviously. So well, somebody will. Yeah, we won't. For sure. How about that? We won't be complaining. Thanks for tuning in. Everybody have a happy Halloween. Be safe out there. Eat lots of candy. Get a sugar high. Stay up late and enjoy your Celtics basketball tomorrow. Again, for Sean, for Evan, I am Adam. We'll talk to you again soon.